Bunch of stuff to get into today. We're starting with the Hantavirus. Should you be worried? Also, Disney cruise members were arrested for child porn. That is not great for Disney. And is Iran self-imploding? All that and more right now. Welcome back to the Republic Brothers podcast. He's Matt. I'm Mike. Today is May 14th, 2026, and this is episode 56. Please hit that subscribe button so you don't miss our next episode. We took Sunday off to celebrate Mother's Day, but we are back and we have a ton to catch up on. Happy Mother's Day to all the moms out there. We're going to start the show today talking about the Hantavirus. At this point, I think we've all seen the story of the cruise ship that's just floating around.
And we're starting with a Fox News alert. A group of American passengers from the cruise ship that's linked to the deadly Hantavirus outbreak, they have landed back here in the United States.
So they're now being taken to the National Quarantine Center in Omaha, where they're going to be monitored for symptoms.
So as these travelers make their way to homes in countries, more than 20 countries around the world, their respective medical teams are addressing how to contain the virus. As of this morning, a French passenger and American passenger have tested positive. Another American currently has mild symptoms. These 17 Americans are now back on U.S. soil as of this morning. 2 of them traveled in the plane's biocontainment unit. Each individual will undergo clinical assessment and receive care based on their conditions. That's according to the Department of Health and Human Services. And if you're thinking this all feels like 2020 all over again, doctors address those concerns.
We have a team on the ground that's going to help these 17 Americans, bring them back to a facility in Nebraska. We're going to have them isolate for about 42 days. That's what the literature says. We've handled outbreaks like this before. My message to the American people is, please don't worry. This is not one of those things like COVID where there's 15 different alarm bells.
Currently, there are 6 states monitoring people who have traveled on that ship recently. The passengers who disembarked yesterday in the Spanish Canary Islands were sprayed with a disinfectant. They were met with personnel that you can see there in this footage with full hazmat gear. Experts believe that the initial infection happened before passengers began the trip at the beginning of April in Argentina, likely from rodent exposure during a land excursion in Patagonia. The Hantavirus is contracted typically with contact of rodent urine, feces, or saliva, and 3 people have died since this outbreak began.
So what exactly are we dealing with? Hantavirus is a family of viruses spread primarily by rodents. In North America, the main concern is the sin nombre virus, which leads to hantavirus pulmonary syndrome, or HPS. This is a severe respiratory disease that can be fatal because it essentially causes your lungs to fill with fluid, making it hard to breathe. Now, here's how you get it. You don't actually get it from a bite, or not usually. You get it through breathing it in. It specifically comes from deer mice, white-footed mice, and cotton rats. The virus is carried in the rodent's urine, droppings, and saliva. When you sweep out an old dusty shed or something and stir up a nest in the attic, those dried particles get kicked into the air. You breathe in those contaminated dust particles, and now the virus has a new host. You can also catch it by touching something that's contaminated and then touching your nose or mouth. You'll see a fever, chills, fatigue, and deep muscle aches in your thighs and hips. Flu-like symptoms, basically, but about 4 to 10 days later, the late symptoms kick in, coughing and extreme shortness of breath. The fatality rate on this thing is 38%. So far, there are 11 cases and 3 deaths. A group of 17 Americans and 1 British national who lives in the U.S. were evacuated from that ship and flown back via a government-arranged flight. 1 American man tested positive, however, he is currently asymptomatic. Another passenger developed mild symptoms during the flight home. Both the positive passenger and the symptomatic passenger were transported in the aircraft's biocontainment units out of extreme caution. The passengers landed Monday morning and were taken to the University of Nebraska Medical Center in Omaha. The passenger who tested positive was admitted directly to the Nebraska Biocontainment Unit for high-level monitoring. The remaining passengers are being held at the National Quarantine Unit for clinical assessment and monitoring. They will be monitored for 42 days, which matches the virus's long incubation period. Interestingly, health authorities are also tracking 7 additional Americans who had already disembarked the ship and returned home before the outbreak was even confirmed. They are currently being monitored by their respective state and local health agencies. 42 days in solitary confinement, basically. Matt, do you think the judge from Cole Allen's case will be asking why they're being treated so badly?
No.
Of course not.
When I first heard this story, did it not remind you of COVID, but way worse? Do you remember 2 weeks to stop the spread? And then 2 weeks turned into 2 years?
Yep.
42 days of isolation is tough on anyone. Hantavirus is far more lethal than COVID, but less likely to be transmitted human to human. This is not COVID. It will not shut down the economy. And anyone who tries to use it as an excuse for that should be thrown out of office with pitchforks. We, of course, hope for the best for the people who have been quarantined. Long periods of isolation are tough for anyone to go through. Do not panic, though, and go on a shopping spree where you buy ridiculous amounts of one product. As I said before and after COVID, if you needed 144 rolls of toilet paper for a 2-week period, someone should have been seeing a doctor long before COVID.
The whole reason I bring this up is the conspiracy theories. So you've got the planned pandemic theory, which is the idea that the government wanted a pandemic. I saw some people saying that it was too much of a coincidence that the passengers that came back to the U.S. are from all those states that just redistrict. Then you have the big pharma theory, which is people saying that this is big pharma's way of generating profit. You buying into any of that?
No. Where was the ship? Where were the people from on that ship? There are just too many variables, in my opinion, to think it was some massive government job or some planned pandemic outbreak. It would take too many people to pull it off, and you have to be sure none of them will break from the party line. As I have said before, some conspiracy theories are harder to pull off than the actual thing they claim didn't happen. Faking the moon landing in the 1960s would have been harder than actually going to the moon.
Yeah, I didn't assume that you would think any of those theories carried any weight.
They don't.
Now, I've heard some people saying that this thing's not even close to what COVID was, obviously. I think that's our take on it as well. This thing is too deadly for people to not take it seriously, though, if there was a huge outbreak. But I just don't see that happening. 38% fatality rate, though, and that's international, apparently. I saw somewhere that the fatality rate in the U.S. is 50%. But this thing is super rare, and it's not coming and spreading like COVID was.
It's nothing compared to COVID. COVID was low risk for killing people, but high risk of transmission. We were all told to get the vaccine to prevent transmission, but it turned out that didn't help. When you are talking about a virus and how dangerous it is, you have to factor in how likely it is to be transmitted, the recovery, and the lethality. The simple reality is human-to-human transmission is virtually impossible with hantavirus. There's not a single documented case of human-to-human transmission in North America. There are a few cases of transmission from humans in South America, but they are incredibly rare. The vast majority of cases are rodent-to-human, so this will not be the next COVID. No need to panic for anyone out there. You can still go to work and do your job.
All right, well, that's pretty much all we have on the hantavirus. It's not really a huge story. I think a lot of people are blowing it up to be a lot bigger than it actually is.
I think because of COVID, a lot of people's risk assessment has been destroyed. They heard a disease and they assumed it was deadly and that anyone could get it and it's really easy to get it. That is simply not the case.
Yeah, let's move on to our next topic here. This is actually a pretty big one. Between April 23rd and April 27th, federal agents from U.S. Customs and Border Protection and Homeland Security Investigations executed Operation Tidal Wave. Agents boarded 8 different cruise ships docked in San Diego. A total of 28 crew members were detained. About 10 of those were Disney Cruise Line workers who were led off the ships in handcuffs while still in their work uniforms. While early reports suggest immigration raids, the CBP later confirmed that these individuals were targeted for involvement in a child sexual exploitation material racket. This included the viewing, possession, and distribution of child pornography.
The Walt Disney Company is speaking out after ICE officials nabbed several of its crew from a company cruise ship last month as part of a child pornography sting. Now, this federal operation is massive and it's ongoing. Customs and Border Protection told the California Post they arrested 28 workers from 5 different vessels between April 23rd and the 25th. Now, Disney says they're cooperating with authorities, but noted that the majority of those apprehended were not employed by Disney directly. A spokesperson told the Post that any who were Disney employees were fired. Quote, "We have a zero tolerance policy for this type of behavior." Customs and Border Protection said that many of those arrested were from the Philippines, as well as one detainee from Portugal and another from Indonesia. They also confirmed, quote, "All subjects were involved in either the receipt, possession, transportation, distribution, or viewing of child sexual abuse material or child pornography." The agency has canceled their visas and are removing them from the country.
This was not a random check. The investigation was triggered by information received from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Forensics teams reportedly linked the workers' personal devices to the exchange of illicit images. As of May 10th, the U.S. has revoked the visas of these workers, 26 from the Philippines, 1 from Portugal, and 1 from Indonesia, and immediately deported them to their home countries. Disney has been quick to distance itself from the situation while confirming that several of their employees were caught up in it. Families on the Disney Magic reported being unsettled after seeing people who had been serving their children all week being hauled away in restraints by federal agents. Immigration advocacy groups have held press conferences in San Diego questioning the speed of the deportations. They are arguing that the workers were removed so quickly that their due process rights may have been violated. "We decided we don't want them here anymore. That was their due process."
Yes, and once their visas were revoked, they're here illegally, so time to go. I just love that they love due process rights for illegals when they won't even give that same benefit to Americans.
Yeah, and they're protecting people that were viewing child pornography that are on a Disney cruise line and are around children all day, every day.
But if you did it, it's bad. But since they're not American, it's okay. Due process is different for someone who is not a citizen. They do not and should not get a million appeals of each step of the process. I'm quite pleased with the outcome here, where we got them out of the country quickly, where they don't sit in jail for months or years, which costs taxpayer money to house them. Get them out of here. On Disney's side of this, I get why they distance themselves, but I hope this sparks a review of their hiring process. Why did you have these migrants on your ship who were exploiting children? Was it a good idea to have them around kids? The parents on that ship were right to feel uncomfortable with the fact that there were that many people on the ship who were into children, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, it's rather disgusting when you really think about it. I mean, I guess you don't even really have to think about it that hard. It's just downright disgusting.
No sense of right and wrong between adults and children for them. Just a little ridiculous, if you ask me.
Now, let's move on to our latest developments with Iran. We are moving right along today. President Trump officially rejected Iran's latest counterproposal on Sunday, calling it totally unacceptable and a piece of garbage. He stated the ceasefire now has about a 1% chance of living.
President Trump reacted overnight to the Iranian response to the U.S. peace proposal. The president posting on Truth Social, quote, "I have just read the response from Iran's so-called representatives. I don't like it. Totally unacceptable." In another post, he went on to say, in part, "For 47 years, the Iranians have been tapping U.S. along, keeping us waiting, killing our people with their roadside bombs, destroying protests, and recently wiping out 42,000 innocent unarmed protesters and laughing at our now great again country. They will be laughing no longer." Iranian state media reported the response included security of the Strait of Hormuz and an end to the war, but did not address the key Trump administration demand to address Iran's nuclear program. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu echoed a similar sentiment in an interview over the weekend, saying the war isn't over yet because Iran still has nuclear material.
I think it accomplished a great deal, but it's not over because there's still nuclear material, enriched uranium that has to be taken out of Iran. There's still enrichment sites that have to be dismantled. There's still proxies that Iran supports. There are ballistic missiles that they still want to produce. Now, we've degraded a lot of it, But all of that is still there, and there's work to be done.
Tehran is insisting on a full end to the war on all fronts. The lifting of the U.S. naval blockade on their ports, and the release of all frozen assets abroad. Trump is heading to Beijing this week to meet with President Xi Jinping, reportedly to pressure China into using its leverage to force Iran back to the table or risk further escalation. Reports emerged on May 11th that the UAE has been carrying out secret military strikes against Iran. In response, Israel has reportedly moved Iron Dome batteries and personnel into the UAE to help them defend from Iranian retaliation. Iran has effectively redefined the Strait of Hormuz as a much larger authority zone and warned that any vessels from countries sanctioning Iran will face problems if they try to pass. A senior Iranian lawmaker warned yesterday that if the country is attacked again, they may review their policy and enrich uranium to 90%. Intelligence reports also indicate that Russia has been using the ceasefire period to ship drone components and missile technology to Iran via the Caspian Sea to help them rebuild capabilities lost in the initial U.S.-Israeli strikes. That leads us to this clip of Marco Rubio. If Iran thinks we're not going to shoot back, they got another thing coming.
If you fire at a U.S. Navy ship, what are we supposed to do? Say, oh, there's a ceasefire, we're not going to shoot down your drone. That's a stupid question. That's a stupid position to take. Of course we fired back at them. They were shooting at us. That's what I would expect to do. Only stupid countries don't shoot back when you're shot at, and we're not a stupid country.
Do you expect that or have you conveyed any red lines to Iran where, if the ceasefire or whatever you call it, if they cross
the red line is clear.
lines,
If they threaten Americans, they're going to get blown up. I mean, that's how much clearer can you be than that? If you are a missile launching guy, whatever they call that job, and you're sitting there and you fire a missile at the United States and we saw you fire it, we're going to hit you. Of course we are. Who doesn't do that? Unless you want to get your ship sunk. I mean, we're not going to let our ships get sunk by the Iranians with their little, their drones that they're firing. They don't have a navy anymore, but they bring out these little Boston whaler fishing boats and they try to swarm you. We're going to blow those boats up if they're coming towards our boats. I don't know if that's a red line, but I hope they know it is by now. So if I were one of these Iranians on a fast boat and they tell you, hey, your mission is to go after a U.S. destroyer, you're probably not going to survive. I think that's a red line.
If you don't shoot back, they will keep doing it. Iran only responds to strength, so you have to show them that. We've talked about it before, but the left saying we are losing does not actually help the U.S. when it comes to dealing with Iran. Iran hears we say that, and they take that as they are winning so they can keep going.
Yeah, at this point, Iran is self-imploding. At some point, all this is going to fall down on their head. It's just a matter of how long. They're only making things harder on themselves.
The previous Ayatollah's son has been severely injured. He's in hiding. He's incredibly difficult to get a hold of.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio and presidential envoy Steve Witkoff met with Qatar's prime minister and minister of foreign affairs in Miami, discussing U.S. support for Qatar's defense, continued partnerships, and efforts to ensure stability in the Middle East. And just days ahead of President Trump's high-stakes visit to China, Rubio has argued that it is in China's best interest that Iran stop closing the Strait of Hormuz.
You can't buy from them if you can't ship it there, and you can't buy from them if your economy is being destroyed by what Iran is doing.
All of that is true. China is far more dependent on oil that comes from the Gulf region than we are. So it is in their interest for the strait to be open. That was Mike Waltz saying the new Ayatollah was hiding. Is that true? We do not know if he is even alive. He has never done a public appearance for reasons you can probably figure out. We just saw they had a ceremony remembering all the fallen members of the regime. And the new Ayatollah's picture was there. Is he even alive?
I would venture to guess that he's not even alive. I mean, that's my opinion on it.
That was my thought, and I assume the military leadership is just leaving his name up there in place so that a new, bigger target doesn't happen.
Yeah, because wouldn't that open things up for someone else to try to take over if they find out that the new Ayatollah was dead?
Yes, and if he's supposedly alive, they can call the shots.
Yep. Well, let's move on to some news out of Cuba now. We haven't talked too much about Cuba yet, so let's get into the latest $100 million offer.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio says Cuba turned down $100 million in humanitarian aid from the U.S. as the country continues to struggle after a devastating hurricane and ongoing economic crisis. Rubio saying, quote, "We've offered the regime there $100 million of humanitarian aid that, unfortunately, so far, they have not agreed to distribute to the people in Cuba. So we did the hurricane relief, but we're offering more, and it's time, and it's the regime that's not accepting it." Rubio going on to say the administration wants to help the people of Cuba while slamming the Cuban regime as, quote, "incompetent."
So Rubio says the money was intended to provide food, medicine, and clean water to millions of Cubans who are currently suffering through an intense humanitarian and energy crisis. Washington reportedly wanted the aid distributed directly to the people rather than through the Cuban government's centralized channels. So why did Cuba turn it down?
Because they don't want to distribute the aid. When you give aid to a communist government, the people at the top always take care of themselves first. Cuba is no different. And the simple truth is the people at the top do not care about the suffering of their own people. They claim to be compassionate, but they are only acting that way to get the power and maintain it. The second reason is a bit more cynical, but the Cuban government wants the people to suffer so they can shine a light on how terrible the Americans are. They will portray this as America trying to kill their people, even though it was terrible economic policy that put them in this position. Any reason to blame someone else in a communist regime is a good reason in their books.
Yep, makes sense on why a country like Cuba would turn down that money and then try to blame us for it, right?
Exactly. Communists are the compassionate ones who want everyone to be equal. They will get that, but you will all be poor except for the people you put in power.
Let's move on to a couple quick things here just to round out the show. We got an update from the Charlie Kirk case. 4th District Judge Tony Graff denied a motion by the defense to ban cameras, microphones, and still photography from the proceedings. The judge ruled that electronic media coverage helps the public access court proceedings when physical space is limited. He emphasized that live streaming allows citizens to observe the justice system firsthand and hold the government accountable. Defense attorneys for Tyler Robinson argue that sensational media coverage and online commentary would taint the jury pool and vilify their client. The judge disagreed, stating that he was not so cynical as to believe that responsible journalism doesn't exist in the case. The push for cameras was backed by a coalition of media outlets, prosecutors, and Kirk's widow, Erica Kirk, who argued that transparency is the best defense against the conspiracy theories that are circulating around her husband's death. While cameras are allowed, Judge Graff has imposed strict rules to protect the defendant's rights. Cameras must be positioned at the back of the courtroom to prevent them from capturing close-ups of Robinson or his private conversations with his legal team. Photographers are barred from getting detailed shots of the defense's documents or computer screens, and media organizations must request at least 2 weeks before any given hearing, rather than having a blanket permission. Although the defense lost on the camera issue, they won a request to delay the preliminary hearing from mid-May to early July. This is to allow more time to review the discovery evidence. Well, Matt, we were skeptical that the cameras would be allowed, but it looks like we're going to get to watch this trial live.
It seems like the defense attorneys forgot that people celebrated what their client did. Why would the judge ban cameras when the defendant murdered someone while hundreds, if not thousands of people were looking directly at the victim? Cameras are a necessary thing here. The gruesome details will be shown, and the people that cheered for someone's death might have a second thought. Will they actually reconsider? Time will tell.
What I think is really funny, too, I don't know if you saw that Kevin Hart had his roast the other night, and someone made a joke about George Floyd, and now everyone on the left is upset. I think it was Tony Hinchcliffe made the joke, and now everyone's upset that he made this joke about George Floyd, and now, of course, everyone on the right is saying, well, you were all laughing at Drewski's skit of Erica Kirk and making fun of her. You were all laughing at Charlie Kirk being assassinated, and now you want us to not laugh when someone tells a joke about George Floyd? You can't have it both ways.
The difference is the people the right were backing were actually good people. Was George Floyd a good person? No. But he's the martyr they chose. They chose poorly, but that's who they wanted. The crackhead that did drugs. That was their guy. Our guy was someone who wanted free speech.
Yeah, and now at this point, speaking of the people that they're trying to back, let's move on to Cole Allen. He entered a not guilty plea on all of his charges.
And we told viewers at the top of the hour that the suspect in the White House Correspondent Dinner shooting, Cole Allen, had his arraignment this morning. We understand he just entered his plea in federal court. We're going to send things out to David Spunt, who is joining us live outside of that courthouse. David, what's the latest?
Hey, guys, a not guilty plea entered by Cole Allen during this arraignment. Not surprising. We figured he would do so based on the paperwork that was filed in court over the past couple of weeks, but not guilty plea to 4 charges, 2 gun charges, 1 attempting to assassinate the President of the United States, the most serious charge of them all, and then finally assault on a federal officer when he shot, according to authorities, shot that Secret Service agent in the chest. Thankfully, that Secret Service agent is okay. If convicted, Cole Allen could spend the rest of his life behind bars. Today is a preliminary hearing and an arraignment. Interestingly enough, and I'll leave you with this, I mentioned this about 20 minutes ago at the top of the show, that he wants U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro and Todd Blanche off the case, arguing that since they are potential victims because they were inside the dinner, it's not proper for them to be on the case. Legal experts like Jonathan Turley, who you interviewed, say that that's going to be a long shot. We'll see if that eventually comes to be. But right now, through his federal public defenders, he has entered a plea of not guilty in federal court behind me to these 4 charges. Guys.
There's literally a video of him doing it. Like, he literally shot someone. We all know he's guilty.
Let's be pragmatic here. If you did something horrific and there was video of it, you may say you are not guilty simply to try and get a better plea deal. You have to play the game and be pragmatic. You know it costs money for the government to bring these charges against you, and every time you sit in front of a judge, it costs money. They are most likely playing the math game, hoping they're going to get a better offer from the prosecutors, where their client will get off with a lesser sentence. The evidence against him is quite overwhelming, and they most likely know that. It's just about getting the best deal they can. They will cost taxpayers as much money as they can to get to that deal. They know the evidence, and they know going to trial likely won't go well. So play the game to get the best deal.
Yeah, I think the prosecutors are going to see right through that, unfortunately. I mean, with all the video they have, there's not really much to argue about. They can sit around and be like, this case is open and shut, basically. So, last thing we have for today, I found this clip from Bill Maher's show a while back, and I thought everyone needed to hear this. You've repeatedly said that a lot of networks are just mouthpieces, and apparently Bill Maher agrees with you. Here's his tips for finding out if your news source is just looking for clicks.
I thought as a public service, since it's so hard to find reliable news these days, tonight I would provide a few rules of thumb for trying to follow the news in our modern age. Starting with, if the headlines in your preferred news outlet routinely feature words like shreds, destroys, pummels, bashes, your outlet is a partisan piece of shit. Either that or you're reading a Batman comic. Ditto with obliterates, roasts, annihilates, and owns. You're supposed to be a source for information, not Nikki Glaser at the Tom Brady roast. 2, any news source that quotes the internet or writes Twitter says or a bunch of hacks too lazy to do real journalism. You can pretend you wrote a piece on the zeitgeist, but what you really did was look on your phone and quote the 3 angriest people with the most time on their hands. 3, if your news outlet consistently reduces everything that happens in the world to who the president of America is, get rid of it. It's just thoughtless, reflexive team politics. Trust me, no one lighting a tire fire in Haiti is thinking, I wouldn't have done this under Trump, but given the weakness of the Biden administration, why not? Every problem in the world isn't caused by the president. When that train derailed in East Palestine, it wasn't because Trump deregulated the brakes and the container ship didn't hit the bridge because of Biden's woke DEI agenda. These aren't news stories. They're storylines pumped into your bubble. 4, always be aware that once the news became a profit division of media companies, they stopped being in the news business and are now in the audience stroking business. The goal is no longer to inform opinions, it's to reinforce them. Walter Cronkite used to say, that's the way it is. Now it's, that's our story and we're sticking to it. Narrative first, whole story never. On Fox, a Venezuelan migrant is always stabbing a white lady. And on NPR, where they stop bashing the rich long enough only to beg for money. Jamaica is a paradise and Nebraska is a no-go zone. News Nation reported this year that the U.S. was on track for nearly a 300% increase in measles cases. 300%? Wow, that sounds like it could be millions. It was 35, because they just want to manipulate you into clicking. Look, I have 10 fingers. You want to see me suddenly have 80% less?
That's a funny clip. I've had that saved for a couple months, and I just kept forgetting about it. At this point, I think every single news outlet is just using the headlines that they like.
These outlets all need to make money. Their websites and their programs are designed to get people to click. Bill Maher's right there. It is about engagement, which drives revenue. You can go and look at every news company, every YouTuber, every social media influencer. They all look at the algorithm and try to play the algorithm to get more people to watch or listen. Now, we are at the end of the show, which means it's blind ranking time. I've got a new topic for you. Today, you're going to be ranking late night TV hosts.
Oh, boy.
The first name on the list is the man who is losing his program, Stephen Colbert.
Stephen Colbert. I'm going to start with him at 4.
Number 4, interesting start. Jimmy Fallon is next.
Jimmy Fallon. I'm going to put Jimmy Fallon at 2.
Number 2, okay. The next name is also Jimmy, but Jimmy Kimmel.
5.
Number 5. That was quick.
Yeah, obviously Jimmy Kimmel's not funny. At least Jimmy Fallon, I think he tries to stay out of politics a little more than the rest of them do. So
he's definitely funnier than Kimmel.
Yeah, he's definitely funnier.
The next name up, keeping in mind you have 1 and 3 open, is the man we talked about earlier, Bill Maher.
Who's coming last, though, is the question. I feel like I want to save one for someone specific, so I'm going to throw Bill Maher at 3.
Bill Maher, 3. I think you'll be happy with 1, though, because at 1 you have Greg Gutfeld.
Okay, so that was the other name that I had in mind, so that makes sense. I'm good with that. I think Gutfeld is actually funny, and he has other people on the show that are also funny, so
Gutfeld at 1, Fallon at 2, Bill Maher at 3. Should Bill be 2 or 3?
I would probably flip Jimmy Fallon and Bill Maher. Yeah.
Okay. And Stephen Colbert at 4 and Jimmy Kimmel 5.
All right, everyone. That's it for episode 56 of the Republic Brothers Podcast. Before you click away, please hit the subscribe or follow button. New episodes drop every Monday and Thursday. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time.